Here we have an example in which they give us a sinusoidal graph and they want us to come up with the formula for it. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, let's go back to the notes and see an example of doing one like this. So back to the notes. So going from a graph, find the equation. So how do we do it? So step one, you first have to find a box that contains one cycle of sine or cosine. One cycle of sine or cosine. So how do we do that? You got to be really clear on exactly what happens in one cycle of sine or cosine. What am I talking about? Well, look at sine. Sine starts in the middle, goes up, goes down, back to the middle. Same thing here. Goes down first for a negative sign. Whereas cosine's a U-shape. Up or U-shape down for positive or negative cosine. So do you see the difference? Cosine does not start or end in the middle. He starts high, finishes high, is a U for positive, U up for positive, and he starts low, bottom of the box, and ends low for a negative cosine. He's a U turned upside down. Whereas sine always starts in the middle and ends in the middle. Never high or low as far as the edges. He starts in the middle, ends in the middle. Now, if he's a positive sign, it means he goes up first and then down. Whereas if he's a negative sign, he goes down first, then up. But either way, sine starts in the middle, ends in the middle. Starts in the middle, ends in the middle. Whereas cosine starts high, ends high, U-shape up, starts low, ends low, U-shape down. So you got to be really clear on that. Cosine or U-shapes, up or down, sine starts and ends in the middle. All right, so you got to go to your box and find a box that contains a sine or a cosine. Let's go back to it and do it. All right. Now, this one's a more advanced question than that example. Could I go right here and make a box? Could I just go right from 0 and just like make a box? No. Why not? That's what we did in the example. Right here, see where it hits at 0, at x equals 0. It's hitting right there. That's not the top, right? Because the top's right here. That's not quite the top of the graph. It's not the top of the graph, nor the middle of the graph, and it's clearly not the bottom. Well, then that means you can't do that, right? Because you have to capture one exact cycle, which means you have to capture high to high for cosine or low to low for upside down cosine, or if you're doing sine, you got to go middle, high, low, middle, or, the other way, low first and, it's supposed to go like that. That was bad drawing. Okay, anyway, middle to middle, you got to have middle to middle or high and low. You can't have this, which is not the top and it's not the middle. Do you see the problem? We can't do that. We got to either have the top or the bottom or the middle. We can't have some sort of in-between point. That's not the conclusion or the beginning of one exact cycle. What do you do then? You just back up a little bit to the top right here. Oh, let me do that in red. Back up right here to the top and go right here to the top. And that becomes your box. Do you see that? You've got to go top to top. Now you think, well, wait a minute, Mr. Aaron, could you have just gone like, could you just gone middle right here to like middle right here and just made this your box, middle to middle? Yep, you totally could. And that would be a sine graph, middle to middle. And you could write the equation that way, and the homework system knows it's right. It'll give you credit. I'll give you credit on the exam. Or you could do cosine. I hope you're getting the point. Sine and cosine are the same thing. They're just shifted from each other. There's no difference between sine and cosine except for a shift. So any of these sinusoidal graphs really could be written as a sine formula or a cosine, depending on where you make your box. Do you realize that? I could have totally made the box from here to here, and this would have been a sine graph. Or I can do the red box and call it a cosine graph. They're just going to have a different shift. Really, it's just going to have a different C. The horizontal shift is just different. That's it. That's the only difference between sine and cosine. They're just shifted from each other. That's why they're called sine and cosine. They're like a co-pilot. They're with each other. They're the same thing. They're partners. They're just a shift off of each other. They're not like totally different. All right, back to it. So do either one you want. Doesn't matter. The homework, the test, we all know it's the same. We'll give you credit. So this homework system is really nice. I tested it with various answers. It knows it when it's right. Any version. It's very nicely done. The people that made these homework systems, they know what they're doing. All right, so here we go. So we're going to treat it like this. So the way I have it in the box, it's a U shape. So that means it's a cosine, isn't it? So it's A cosine BX plus C plus D. Because I chose to form a box where it starts high, finishes high. It's a U shape. I'm doing a cosine box. Okay, so that's steps 1 and 2. Make your box. Identify if you got sine or cosine in that box. So now back to it. Again, we have cosine because ours is a U shape. If we started in the middle and ended in the middle, it would be sine. We've been over that. All right, I'm beating that horse. That horse is dead. Let's move on. So next, find the middle of the box. The middle of the box is your D. And then find out how far above and below the box goes, above and below the middle the box goes. That's your amplitude. Back to it. All right, what's the middle of our box? The middle of our box is just 0. The middle is 0, so that means D is 0. And how far above and below the middle do we go? That's the amplitude, that's 3. And ours is going to be positive because our U shape is up, right? If it was a U shape down, then that would be a -3 for A. Okay, so we have a +3 for A. All right, we got A. We got D. We're halfway there. We see B and C now. Let's go back to the notes. How do we get B? It's all about the width of the box there. So it's all about the width of the box. Is your period is 2 pi over B equals 6. Well, whatever your width is. So what is the width of our box? Whoops. Sorry about that. I just jumped to a different place in the notes. Somewhere totally different. Sorry. Let me get back here. There we go. All right, so what is the width of our box? Goes from there to there, doesn't it? So the width of our box is, can you tell? It goes from, this is like a half back to 10 and a half back. So it's 10. Do you see that? If you go from, this is 0.5 right here, right? This is 0.5, and this is -10.5. So from, well, this is I should say negative. This is -0.5, right? Because here's 0 right here. So -0.5 to -10.5. That's 10. That's a width of 10. So that means our period is the width of the box is 10. So bring that over here. The period formula is 2 pi over B. That's the period. So we have the period equal to 10. So that means 2 pi over B is 10. The width, and we don't need to say negative. You might say, well, it's just negative. Remember, it's just a width. If somebody said, what's the width of that rectangle? Or a table. If you're in a real life room and somebody said, what's the width of that doorway? Nobody would say negative, right? The width is positive. So period is always positive. All right, solve that equation for B. Put this over 1, diagonal, cross multiply. 2 pi times 1 is 10B. So that means 2 pi is 10B. Solve for B, divide by 10, boom. B equals 2 goes into 10 5 times pi over 5. So B is pi over 5. So we got B. We've already had D for a bit and A. Now we just need C. What's C? It's going to come from the horizontal shift. C is not the horizontal shift, but it leads us to the horizontal shift. See right here, the horizontal shift, which means the right edge or the left edge. It doesn't matter. You can use either edge. Why? Because these boxes just repeat forever, right? Forever. It just keeps cycling over and over and over again. So you could call either edge the start. Why? Because this is the start of the next box, or this is the start of this box, whatever. Either edge, right edge, left edge, is the start of a box, is the horizontal shift. So we're saying, how has the graph been shifted sideways? Its starting edge, which is really the right edge or the left edge, has been shifted where? And that formula is negative c over b. That's the horizontal shift, negative c over b. Let's go back to it. So what about our box? Where has it been shifted? Right there. There's the horizontal shift. Horizontal shift is negative 0.5, right? The right edge of our box has been shifted. Here's 0. It's been shifted back 0.5, hasn't it? It's off. It's not starting right on 0. The horizontal shift is negative 0.5. It's been shifted back. Now you might say, well, what about this? Should we use this edge? Negative 10.5? You could. You totally could. It'll work. It's a little messier. You could use either edge. It'll work. The homework system knows it's right. I'll give you credit on the test, but I'll just use the one that's closest to 0. It's the same. It'll work either way. The formula will come out looking different, but it's the same formula. It'll work either way. So I'll just do the negative 0.5. So I've got horizontal shift, which is negative 0.5. Now remember, that's not c. That's the mistake some people think, oh, that's c. I got c. I'm done. No, that's negative c over b. That's the horizontal shift formula. It's not just c. The horizontal shift is not just c, it's negative c over b. Just like the period was not just b, it was 2 pi over b is the period formula. Then you solve for b. Same thing here. The horizontal shift is not just c, it's negative c over b. Then you solve for c. We know b. Let's grab b and plug it in right there. Pi over 5, right? So what do we got? We got negative c over pi over 5 is negative 0.5. Good so far. Now, how do we solve this? Well, put this over 1 and cross multiply. What I mean is this is the denominator, and these guys multiply, and then these guys multiply, right? That's what we mean by cross multiply. So then we get, let me bring it up here, negative c times 1, and pi over 5 times negative 0.5. We good there? And so that's negative c equals pi over 5. Now, negative 0.5, that's negative a half, isn't it? I'll just make that a fraction since I'm dealing with fractions. It doesn't matter. You can make it all a decimal. Yeah, in fact, maybe that'd be easier for you. Just make it a decimal. So you multiply this. It'll be negative 0.1 pi. It's 1/10 or 0.1, same thing. Get rid of the negative on both sides, right? Just divide by negative 1 or multiply by negative 1. Either way, doesn't matter. Positive 0.1 pi or 1/10 pi, whatever. Same thing either way. So positive 0.1 pi. We got C. We got it all. We're done. So here it is then. It's A. What was A? 3, positive 3. Right there. Cosine B is pi over 5. Pi over 5. X plus C, 0.1 pi. Plus D, and D was just 0. There it is. There is our formula. Can you read this? Okay, I'm a little scribbly here. 0.1 pi. You can mix decimals and fractions. It doesn't matter. The system's good with it. I'm good with it on the test. I don't care. As long as you figured everything out, I don't care what form you'll give it to me in. As long as it's the truth. That's what we care about in math. There we go.